Dies ist ein Interview mit Dirk Wachtelaer. Er ist ein Schlagzeuger von der belgischen Band Vanishing Pictures.
Dies ist ein Interview mit Dirk Wachtelaer.
In 1967, you founded the Centrum Freier Kunst, which was a meeting point for live free music, art exhibitions, experimental poetry, and happenings. This seems to have been like a blueprint of your further work. In 1967, you were 18 years old. When I was 18, I didn't have a clue of what to do with my life besides playing drums. So can you tell us about your early childhood, the influence of your parents and your early education? What made that you already had such a mature view at such a young age?
My parents were rather tolerant and gave me a lot of freedom as being the last one of 6. There was music and art in the house, which looked like a style mix in itself, almost postmodern. I refused kindergarten, but in our garden I could demontage the sandbox at the age of 5 to build my own little huts. That was such big fun that I always developed new little houses and the idea to once be an architect. When I was 9, my elder brother took me to a Dada exhibition where I got the idea that I also may do things like those. My parents traveled a lot and brought wonderful gifts for my little collections. They never needed to push me doing things. I picked up things myself. At the age of 12, I sold my electric toy trains to purchase a clarinet. A year later, my parents gave me a record of Charlie Parker, and for my 15th birthday, I received an Italian tenor sax from them. Before, I had cleared the basement to install a club to perform with my New Orleans band, and soon I had a jazz tent with West Coast themes. The enlarged club rooms became the Centrum Freier Kunst. I was still 17 years old when there happened one of the biggest events in June 1967. My father was reading books like from C.G. Jung when I was still 15. So I got curious in this book and from there started being interested in other literature that was not taught at school, like about mystic and Zen, which awakened my interest in those. One of my first oil paintings from 1965 was a monk in German colors. I attended a kind of art elite high school and there learned most of what is necessary to know about contemporary art. At 17, I also purchased my first piece of a small art collection, a piece of the group Zero. After finishing school, I started a design study, but got bored soon and changed to university for being an art teacher. There, Adorno was a professor. The 1968 students' protests had begun, but Frankfurt was also within the cross of Luxus, in Wiesbaden, a town in the west, by the Documenta Kassel in the north, the American GI Clubs in East and the Darmstadt Ferienkurse für neue Musik in the South. In the 60s, composer Dieter Schnebel was one of my short-time mentors, as well as a Jesuit who gave a course in philosophy at high school. There, in 1967, I developed my script über Synästhesie, a kind of manifest about bringing art and music together into one Ereignis. In 1969, I had the chance to produce my ever-first record, together with my free music group Just Music, for the new label ECM in Munich. At that point of time, I was fully equipped for being a professional. But then it took me another 10 years to decide to be it, due to contributing to society what I thought society wants me to make a living.
On the internet there is a lot of information about your music, but not much about your graphic work. Can you tell us more about that and maybe show us some examples? How it started, how it evolved in the course of your life, maybe about the techniques you use or what has influenced you?
Well, in the beginning it was all play, and I still like to keep it that way. Maybe that is the reason that I'm not known for being a serious artist. I have no signature, and similar to my music, they call me polystylist. I started drawing like most kids, stepped into that childish architecture in the garden, and around age 10 began to scan the further landscape around the house, meadows and mining holes, train tracks with echo tunnels, a river with weapons from World War II on the ground. We kids used to pick up the projectiles, cracked them, burned the powder, and wore the bullets around the neck. Something that still fascinates me nowadays when stepping around along the huge military border architecture, the DMZ in South Korea. By the way, I enjoy to shoot, but I'm a pacifist in my heart. At high school, I was ambitious to be number one in the art classes over the years, and later, around 1967, I performed several happenings in the city of Frankfurt. I cannot say that I was influenced by a certain stream of art or artist, but I picked up what I liked and enjoyed and took it as an inspiration. When I was 15, I came across a fascinating catalogue from Paik Nam Jun, who joined the Fluxus movement at that time. Also, I began to create cover art for my records and believed in the synesthesia of theater and film. For some, I was able to do creations from 19 1979 on. Then, in the recent years, living most of the time in South Korea, I had the luck to be invited to contribute for some major museums in Seoul. I like mixed media and started rather early to photograph also and take videos. Also, I use traditional printing techniques sometimes, like lithography, silk print or etching. Altogether, I do not have in mind to leave a kind of opus magnum.
Is there an interaction between your music and your graphic work? And if so, can you tell us some more about that?
I see myself as almost being an autodidact in art and music, and I always liked lo-fi more than academic works. The interaction happens within, and we know about several other innovative musicians who started from the visual arts. I did not mind using old-school elements or kitsch, not only the most extreme contemporary. Nowadays, everything seems possible. It is an inner attitude that counts. I was active in both fields since the beginning.
I have some questions regarding the graphic scores you used for Just Music. Why did you work with graphic scores? Was it because traditional music notation was not sufficient to express your ideas? And how did the musicians react? Were they free to interpret the scores how they wanted, or did you direct them? Can you show us some examples and tell us the pieces they were used in? And did you use graphic scores in other groups than Just Music?
In the 60s, in my free music group Just Music, we step by step left short motive compositions to improvise more freely, then tried out graphic scores and mental themes, which all was a kind of training for sensitivity in this ensemble. There was no conduction, and we called our style herrschaftsfreie Kommunikation, non-dominant communication. We also played along abstract concepts, as for example a Christian Wolff composition. Later I did no more graphic scores, but conceptual scores, including video and mixed media. For example, the instant composition clip, where a video filled with graphics and notes is not only the score, but also the conductor on a monitor. Recently, I had a cooperation on graphic scores together with Vanishing Pictures and Korean improvisers.
Besides music and the visual arts, you've also always been working with literature. You have been writing poetry since the 60s, and you write texts in German, English and Korean. How do you approach your writing? Is it something you do on a daily basis, and has it also evolved during the years?
I always was a shy person, though trying to overcome my natural shyness. In my 20s, my verbal restrictions or Sprachhemmungen came to a high peak. I was extremely skeptical towards the spoken word and searched to express myself through other medias. When I began to embed words into music compositions, I was not eager to make them understandable. I began to like the vague synergy between text and sounds from the early 70s on, and favored intelligent titles and also group names as being important. In 1983, I was invited to compose for Frankfurt Stadtoper a huge event of about 250 participants of diverse local orchestras that I had to coach and finally conduct. That was a long process of daily work, so that a music critic encouraged me to write down a music diary throughout half a year, which was the beginning of my prose text. But I also have worked together with several writers, also in genres that later were called conspiracy theories.
We had one time an artist here living for a couple of months, and he wanted to build this axe continuing this way, but he did not so right. So you see it's going a little bit like this, you know. I never found out if he could not measure right, if he was bad in science, or if he wanted to do a fake. Who knows? I mean, look at this. Artists do this like this. Okay, here we
The
have...
text you wrote in 1967 and was published in your Moondata book has been written under the influence of LSD. How was your experience with drugs, and is it something you still do now? And related to this, what do you think of shamanism?
First of all, I don't take any drugs. I did try out LSD in a very early stage when I was a teenager in the 60s, and LSD was coming up. So in those circles I was around and active with the jazz scene, we were curious about those new substances, and of course we wanted to see what's behind it. So it had some extreme surprises, and those surprises were not always of the very kindest ones. But after that experience, I got still very much into mystics, or anyhow, around that time I started yoga and did some macrobiotic diet and all sorts of mystic journeys, at least through books, and I met some gurus or whatever. And then in about the mid-70s, I came across Gurdjieff and the Fourth Way, and I started studying this kind of school. So, which is very good for me even nowadays. And speaking about meditation, I do sort of relaxation techniques from time to time, and also I think that the Fourth Way gives me at least opens a door for more meditative states within the everyday life. So altogether, this is my personal experience in very short, if you can put these things together anyhow into words. We are speaking here about consciousness widening and those things. But I think these experiences had been always very useful to me during my musical appearances, either in the studio or on stage, because sometimes I came across kind of telepathic states. Or in general, it is good, I would say, in music, especially in free improvised music, when members are conscious about the other participations, the other what's going on, and this should not be in a line, in a linear, one after the other. So I cannot react to somebody in that improvising group in that way, that I wait and see and listen what this and this person is doing in the moment. But it has to be simultaneous. It has to be one holistic process within the music production. And in that way, it is really helpful to be able, kind of telepathic. So that would mean something that's happening in the moment, anywhere. So it could be from far distance, and it could be also on the same stage. Doesn't matter. I think I answered all those questions. One part is still open. This is about the shamanism, and I would say I like shamanism to a certain extent, and especially in South Korea, there's a lot of shamanism going on still nowadays. Young folks go to fortune tellers. They are curious about their future, and all sorts of cleaning encounters at homes when they open a business or whatever. They ask shamans, and they are called mudang here. And I'm not sure if this is it's very ritualistic here in South Korea, but I'm not sure if it's always so authentic in a way, or if it's also sometimes about making money. Anyhow, shamanism can be something really deep, contacting spirits beyond, and healing processes and all those things. This is a very, very deep chapter, and also music plays a big role in shamanism, as everybody knows or might know so far. So I better end here the answer. Thank you.
Could you talk about your work with photography and video? And could you explain your Gedankenfotografie, its relation to tautography and Nensha, and your quantum hacking?
In the 60s, I made artworks with fire, whereas the burning process was what I saw as being the essence. To preserve it, I took 3 minutes films of the burning process. Soon after, I continued with photography, mostly black and white, and learned how to develop the negatives with the help of a small Dunkelkammer. In the beginning of the 70s, I came across the books of Professor Hans Bender about parapsychology and developed from Gedankenfotografie so-called psias, diapositives or slides of psi, mostly as playful fakes, getting interested in borderline events. Psi is the 23rd letter of the Greek alphabet and the first letter of the word psyche. Later, in the 90s, I somehow continued this idea with 2 years of action at the Gedanken Hotel. Similar as in the 80s, I had continued the Zentrum Freier Kunst with the gallery Wassersalon for 7 years at the same place. My first videos I took from 1977 on, at that time still using a huge portable equipment as being art teacher. Later on, I had my own camcorders, partly also to document my music tours. In 1997, I purchased my first digital camcorder, which was a big step forward. I created so-called Gang durch die Maschinen, took photo stills from my videos from a monitor, put those into Xerox processes, and finally used those in videos again, etc. The graphical effects were innovative, but nowadays there is a lot of software to create similar effects. I also used photos to scratch them or overpaint. Nowadays, my motives are driven by looking into South Korea, archaeology, and architecture.